What's going on, everyone? Ronan here, and welcome back to the channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, that means that the poll that you guys voted in had Ash choosing to go on to the SINNOH region for the next timeline. But that means that this is the next chapter in that timeline. If you're watching this on Patreon, that means that you guys get exclusive access to this one. So enjoy the content that only your eyes will get the chance to see. But anyway, before we get into today's topic, I'm going to need you to take a look at this analytical stat bar right here. If you notice, 55.6% of you guys that watch my content are not subscribed. So if you could do me a favor and hit that like button and the subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications because you'll never want to miss another upload. But with all that being said, this is the final part of this diverging timeline. So where are we picking off? Well, last time Ash competed in the SINNOH League, and things didn't go quite as planned, mostly because he didn't have Infernape. So Ash ended up losing to Paul in this timeline, which, like normal, regardless if he wins or loses, he ends up back in Pallet Town. The only difference is he's kind of just been taking it easy. Not because he chose to, but because he's kind of at a loss for what to do. It's been a long time of him traveling. He's hit 4 regions at this point, competed in the Battle Frontier, competed in the Orange Island Championship. He's even gotten a chance to compete against the Elite Four in the Hoenn region, even though he didn't get a chance to fully battle the champion. But what else could he really do? At this point, he's 10 years old and he's got all this stuff under his belt. Well, he's just kind of been wanting to take it easy. You see, in this timeline, when he went to SINNOH, he didn't really spend a lot of time with Latias. He chose to go through most of the SINNOH region without it, developed his own team, because he kind of felt like he was relying on it too much after his adventures in Hoenn and his adventures in the Battle Frontier, which is understandable. When you rely on a Pokemon too much, it kind of becomes your go-to and your other Pokemon tend to suffer. Ash wanted to make sure that he could still train a powerful team without having his crutch with him. Unfortunately, what he went through in Johto when he was relying solely on Charizard ended up happening in the SINNOH region because he was relying solely on Latias, and when you take it away, well, you tend to do a little worse. But anyway, back to the present day at hand. Ash has been on his vacation for a while, but this isn't without visitors. Latias actually spends a lot more time with Ash here at this point, since how Ash is home. It gets a chance to hang out with a lot of its old buddies that it's had a chance to travel with, and it also has a chance to just kind of hang out at Professor Oak's lab, meet Ash's mom and Mr. Mime, Daddy Ash, if you want to call him that, and just enjoy life. The year that it spent away from Ash while he was in SINNOH, well, it really made her homesick for her trainer. And Latias, she's just wanting to catch up on lost time. So much so that her, Ash, and Pikachu often take off just on rides, just hitting Mach speeds, soaring above the clouds, wanting to just enjoy life. It's even gotten to the point to where an old friend, Charizard, even visits from the Johto region on breaks from its training. It likes to test its speed against the Dragon type, although it often loses. But that's okay. Even though Charizard's pride is its main point of getting stronger, it can take an L every once in a while, as long as it gets the win after, so many losses, even though Latias still hasn't lost in a race. But that brings us to our current present day, and Charizard just so happens to visit. It and Latias are gearing up for another race. And Ash, while he doesn't usually go out for these races, something today just seems a little bit different. He's wanting to take part in it. But that's okay though, because he can ride either Charizard or Latias. It doesn't really matter. They both can carry him and Pikachu. Wanting to give Charizard a fighting chance, Ash chooses to ride with Latias. Maybe the extra weight will give Charizard the weight it needs to take a W here. But their destination here, well, they really don't have one. Ash really doesn't know where they go or where they usually race to. And in reality, they never really have a destination in mind. They just race until each other gets tired. And the first one to get tired is usually the one that loses. Unfortunately, Charizard does have great endurance, but its speed is a lot to be desired. But it's feeling extra confident. So Latias turns to Charizard and kind of gives it a little bit of a psychic conversation, saying, where would you like to go today? What direction do you feel like is your best bet at a chance at victory? Because Latias unfortunately knows the outcome of this. Charizard thinks about this for a little while and he's feeling pretty confident. He points his mighty claw in a direction. It's kind of in the direction of the sun. It's setting out in the west, but not necessarily straight to the west. It's slightly off, a little bit southwest in that direction, so to speak. Not directly towards the Johto region, more along the lines of out in the ocean. But this is where Ash chimes in and has to be the voice of reason, telling Charizard that there's not really anything out there but ocean. But Charizard has faced this before. It knows full well that if it gets to the point to where it can no longer fly, Latias will just eventually end up teleporting it and Charizard back to wherever they need to go. So it doesn't really fear this. It's along the lines of just wanting to test its endurance at this point. So Charizard, as stubborn as Ash, puts its foot down. This is what they're doing. And them being over solid water and it being Charizard's major weakness, well, it could push it a little bit. And that's exactly what it wants. Well, Ash shrugs and Pikachu mounts its shoulder while Ash mounts Latias. And just like that, in a flash, Ash's other Pokemon watch as Latias and Charizard take off into the skies at breakneck speed. Ash is enjoying this. He hasn't really been on an adventure with these two in a long while, so he's quite eager to see what Charizard's capable of. Surprising to both him and Charizard itself, he's actually managing to keep up with Latias, but Latias is holding back a little bit to save a little bit face. Not to hurt Charizard's feelings, but just to give it that carrot dangling in front of it. You know, you're almost there. Keep going. The two eventually break away from the land with nothing but ocean surrounding them for miles. And they just keep pushing. Charizard hot on the tail of Latias. This race ends up going on for, well, quite a while, eventually to the point to where the sun is starting to caress the horizon and Ash is starting to become a little bit concerned. He begins to nudge Latias, telling him maybe it's time that they turn around. Latias, always one to want to please its trainer, begins to slow down. This is where Charizard sees his chance. Even though its endurance has kind of reached its limit, it takes this chance to pull ahead, pushing harder and faster, breaking past the trio, and just kind of disappearing off in the distance. It's at this point that Ash gets worried. He knows that Charizard is at his limits and doesn't want it to end up getting hurt or passing out from the strain of the flight and just collapsing into the ocean. So he urges Latias to take off after it. Putting everything it has, Latias bolts in the direction that Charizard took off in. As they move in the direction that Charizard went, a flash of light can be seen, but then nothing. Charizard's not there. Latias has even lost connection with it. Normally it's pretty good about keeping its psychic links with Ash and its Pokemon, but nothing. Ash and Pikachu can't see it. They begin to get worried and they scan the ocean below, but nothing. There's no sign of Charizard. Ash urges Latias to speed ahead, so it picks up its pace to max speed, but Latias is a little worried. There's no way that Charizard could have outpaced it at this point. It's at this point that Latias stops. It turns to face Ash, shaking its head and psychically linking with him, telling him that there's no way that Charizard has gone this far. Something had to have happened with it. In a panic, Ash asks Latias to try and psychically link with it. Latias does this at the behest of its trainer, but it doesn't get anything. It's like Charizard is just disappeared. Worried, Ash begins to panic, so he decides to do the only thing that he can. He sends out Mothim from its belt and tells it to begin to spread out. Look for any signs that Charizard may be down in the water. Latias, using its psychic abilities, begins to scan the surrounding area, trying to find any signs of life. The only thing that it really feels is the Pokemon beneath the waves, and it's becoming concerned. Now, Mothim is doing its best to fight the ocean breeze. Unfortunately, though, it's a bug type, and it's not really meant to be this far away from land. So, after struggling a bit and Ash realizing it, he decides to recall it. But it's at this point that Latias finally gets a hit. It can sense Charizard. It's like it re-emerged, like it just came out of nowhere. Signaling to Ash that it has a lock on it, the trio then bolt in the direction of Charizard, doing whatever they can to get to it, not knowing really what kind of shape it's in. It could be hurt. It could have been attacked by something, but it's none of that. What they see off in the horizon is a group of islands. And as they close in, and on the beach, they see a very familiar face. It's Charizard. It's looking rather confused, not really sure of how it got to this place. Very unfamiliar with its surroundings. Ash lands to double check with Charizard, asking if it's okay. Was it attacked? But Charizard doesn't really have any answers. Doesn't know what happened. Ash asks Latias to scan over Charizard to make sure there's nothing wrong with it. Latias uses its psychic abilities, but it can't really detect anything wrong with it. And then it's to the point to where Ash actually starts to take in the surroundings of where they're at. This place, it's very unusual. He's never even seen anything like it. It's very tropical. When he was riding on Latias, he noticed that there was like 4 or 5 different islands, but these can't be the Seafoam Islands or the Whirl Islands. He had been to both of those before, so what is this place? Getting around the beach, Ash eventually comes across a house that's just built right on it. He's kind of impressed. The only structure that he's seen for miles. With Charizard, Latias, and Pikachu behind him, Ash rushes to knock on the door. He's just trying to talk to some sort of human. He has no idea where he's at or what this place even is. When he knocks on the door, a young woman answers, and she instantly greets Ash with the warmth he's only really felt from a few people in his life, mainly his mother. The young lady introduces herself as Brunette. She's an inhabitant of this beach, and this is her house that she shares with her husband. She then invites Ash inside, because he looks like he's had a long day. Ash turns to tell Charizard and Latias to stay outside as they are a little bit big for the accommodations ahead of them, but Bernadette says nonsense. She tells him they can come inside too. After all, they have to be hungry. And she was just in the process of making a meal for herself. Shocked by this hospitality, Ash doesn't really fight it. He just kind of goes along with it. And after a nice long meal and everyone refilling their bellies, Ash introduces himself, but Bernadette is way ahead of him. She has a pretty good idea of who Ash is. A Battle Frontier champion, taking on the Elite Four of the Hoenn League, getting all the way to the top 8 at the Sinnoh League, and in the Johto League, and the top 16 at the Kanto League, along with a winner of the Orange Islands. Ash's reputation kind of precedes him. It's a lot farther reaching than even he thought. With the formalities out of the way, and now that Ash is feeling a little bit more at ease, he begins to question Bernadette. He asks her what this place is. Where are they? She smiles and laughs. Oh, Ash, this is the Alola region. Alola region? I've never even heard of it. Bernadette smiles, saying that Alola is a popular tourist vacation spot. So it's usually when adults bring their kids here. Usually. But she doesn't see any adults with Ash. So how did he get here? Ash says, well, he's not really too sure himself. His Charizard and Latias were having a race over the ocean, and then suddenly Charizard pulled ahead, then disappeared, and they had no idea where it went. And all of a sudden, Latias could sense it, and they followed its presence, and now they're here. Charizard is just as stumped as Ash is, and Latias. Bernadette smiles, telling Ash that his Charizard must have got caught in an Ultra Wormhole. Ultra Wormhole? What is that? Well, they're a phenomenon that happen quite often here in Alola. We're not really sure what causes them, but they're gateways, if you will, between time and space. They often open up and can lead to places we don't really know. And come to recall, I don't ever think I've ever seen anything go in and come back out. So your Charizard was quite lucky. Ash looks at Charizard and Charizard looks at Ash. They're a bit shocked about that revelation. It could have been lost somewhere that wasn't on Earth, Ash says. Yeah, we're still in the process of studying them. There's actually a place here in Alola called the Aether Paradise. They actually take their time and study these wormholes because they've become so frequent as of late. But not to worry, they usually appear far above the island. So the people who live here really don't have anything to worry about it. Oh, that's great, Ash laughs nervously. But now he's kind of at an impasse. What should he do? It's actually nightfall outside now, so he does want to head home, but he doesn't really feel safe getting there. Bernadette offers a solution, telling Ash that him and his Pokemon, they can kind of just hang out at her place until morning. Then after that, if they don't feel comfortable flying, they can catch a plane from Alola, and they have special equipment that allows them to detect Ultra Wormholes, so they can pretty much evade them with ease, and she can get him back home post-haste. Ash thanks her for this offer, and he decides to turn in for the night with Latias, Pikachu, and Charizard in tow. The next morning, Ash is up early, and he really couldn't sleep the night before. The thought of these Ultra Wormholes and a brand new region has kinda brought the fire back to him. He's feeling like the need to explore a little bit, but that doesn't go for everybody. After Charizard's little near-death experience, it's decided that it's not wanting to stick around Alola. So Ash, being the trainer that he is, decides that he'll just transfer it back to Professor Oak, and at that point, it could head back to the Charizard Valley on its own time. And while he's doing that, he also makes the shift to transfer all of his Pokemon that he was carrying with him, aside from Pikachu and Latias, to go back to Professor Oak as well. He's in a new region. That means new Pokemon and a new Pokemon lead. He's kind of excited. It's been a while since he's felt like this. This place, it feels different. He wants to take the time to get to know it, but that's okay though, because it's all he's got. He's 10 years old, and this could be an extension to the vacation he's been on, but an extension that is going to be very fun. Bernadette is actually happy to host Ash while he's here in Alola. Latias, well, after spending so much time away from Ash while he was in Sinnoh, it's decided to stick around. So it and Pikachu are going to remain with Ash here in Alola. Now comes a couple of questions. Where exactly are we in the timeline? I mean, Burnett mentioned she had shared her place with her husband. Come to find out that his name is Professor Kukui. He's also a professor here in the Alola region, but he's not here in the Alola region. As a matter of fact, he's off in the Kanto region at this current time. He's exploring, battling strong trainers, getting a feel for certain things that Ash comes to find out. One of the things he also learns from Burnett is that there's not actually a Pokemon League challenge here in Alola, which is odd. Ash has never been to a region that doesn't have a Pokemon League. Do they have a Battle Frontier? Or maybe something set up like the Orange Islands? Burnett just laughs, telling Ash that they really don't have anything like that, but they do have their own special challenge that they host once a year. It's known as the Island Challenge, kind of a rite of passage. Ash is intrigued by this, and he wants to get more information. Burnett says, well, her husband really is the authority on this. It's because it has to do with the power of Z crystals and Z moves. Z moves? What's that? Ash questions. Well, it gives a Pokemon the ability to use a 5th move in battle, and it's a super powered move, kind of like a specialty, something meant to end the battle decisively. This gets Ash's attention. What do you mean, end the battle decisively? Well, it's something that is used in high-level battles here in Alola, and our trainers often use it when they're trying to test their strength. Now, this catches Ash's attention. He's always been one to want to test his ability to catch new Pokemon. This Island Challenge, it's different. It's not a Pokemon League, not a Battle Frontier. So what is it exactly? This is where his interest is piqued. He knew staying in Alola was the right move. So he decides to inquire with Burnett about how to enter this Island Challenge. Well, Burnett tells Ash that he's a bit out of luck. They usually only allow people to enter the Island Challenge when they're 11 years old. And well, at this point he's been 10 for a very long time, but she hasn't really put that together yet. Anyway, Ash is kind of bummed out by this, but Burnett tells Ash that there is very rare occurrences that they do make an exception for the Island Challenge, but it's kinda up to the kahuna. Catching Ash's attention again, Burnett fills Ash in on what a kahuna is. It's essentially like the gym leader of the island, you could say. There are trial captains, and then there's the kahuna. If you want to take the Island Challenge and you get the blessing from a kahuna, then they will gift you with a certain item that will help you along your journey. And your journey would be one to gather as many Z crystals as you can, allowing yourself to bond with your Pokemon in the process and really getting closer to build that experience. Because if you don't have a close bond with your Pokemon, then you can't use a Z move. Ash is all in for this. New Pokemon, a new type of move, and a new way to challenge a region. Sign him up. That's it, he declares. He is taking this Island Challenge. Now, he just needs to know where to find this kahuna. Burnett just smiles her usual self, telling Ash that the kahuna of this island, which is known as Mele Mele, is Hala. He's an older gentleman, a bit rough around the edges, stern, strong, but he's going to be the one you want to talk to. So Ash decides to part ways from his home away from home for the time being to go find this Hala character. Spends a lot of time trouncing around the island and getting to know its inhabitants, and also some of its new Pokemon. There's a lot of Pokemon here that he's seen before and a lot more that he hasn't seen. A mixture of many different regions that Ash has and hasn't been to before, but that doesn't stop him. And it's here where he's gonna run into his first encounter while looking for this kahuna Hala. And this encounter happens to be something that Ash mistakes for Pokemon that he's caught before. At first, he thinks it's an off-colored Corphish, kind of like some of these shiny variants he may have seen in the past. But upon further inspection and his new Rotom Dex, Ash is told that this is not Corphish. This is actually known as a Crabrawler, and it's not a water type. It's a fighting type, and it's overly aggressive, showing off why it's a fighting type. Immediately attacking Pikachu out of nowhere, unprovoked or anything. This thing just likes to throw down. Pikachu, seeing that it's kind of got a boxing pose, kind of giving it a callback when they were thrown down with that Hitmonchan back in the Kanto region, Pikachu decides to mount some boxing gloves and throw some blows with this thing. Unfortunately for Pikachu, it's not really a fighting type, and it's not meant to trade fisticuffs with a fighting type, and it ends up taking one to the jaw and dropping it. Latias at this point has just been hanging out, enjoying itself, not not really going back in its Pokeball. And once it realized this little crab thing is too aggressive and it's just going to keep fighting, it kind of just uses its psychic typing ability to subdue it in the moment. And Ash just throws a Pokeball at it because he finds this thing fascinating. This will bring Ash's team count for Alola to 3. Pikachu, Latias, and Crabrawler, which is very interesting. So after the Pokedex has registered Crabrawler as Ash's Pokemon, he lets it out of its ball and it's a little confused. This is at the point to where we're going to introduce Hala into the story. He's quite impressed with Ash and that little Crabrawler. It's been quite a nuisance around the area for a couple of days now. Hala doesn't know where it came from, but it's been kind of attacking anybody and anything that it can get its hands on because of it being a fighting type, kind of just trying to prove its strength. But it's at this point that Hala realizes that he doesn't know who this boy is. Ash introduces himself and says that he's actually been looking for Hala, and Hala, being the big person he is, who's also got a very, very big personality, just laughs. Is that so? And why would little old you be looking for big old me? And Ash goes to inform him that he's interested in taking the island challenge. While Hala is a bit taken back by this, because normally outsiders from the mainland don't really take the island challenge, he does ask Ash what his age is. Ash tells him that he's 10, but he's heard that there could be exceptions. Hala considered this for a little while, and after looking over the facts that he's seen and how Ash kind of just, subdued Crabrawler with his Latias, which Hala has never seen before, he's okay to go with it. He gives Ash his endorsement to take the island challenge. But if he's going to do that, the first person he's going to have to go find is the trial captain of Melee Island, which Ash is okay with. Hala points Ash in the direction of Lima, the trial captain for this particular challenge. He's the normal type trial captain, and if Ash can beat the totem Pokemon that he's in charge of, then he will get the chance to battle Hala. Ash, excited about a chance to battle totem Pokemon, something he's never heard of before, takes this, and he decides to hunt down Lima after getting directions from Hala. It takes him a little while, but he eventually finds his way to Lima, and Lima's been told about Ash from Hala. Now, Lima's not too keen on the whole person under the age of 11 taking the trial challenge, but he goes with Hala's gut on this one, and he tells Ash, alright, well, I have a Pokemon for you. If you can beat my totem Pokemon in a battle, then you'll get the opportunity to claim the Z Crystal that it guards, and then you can move on to Hala. So Ash does just that. He challenges the totem Pokemon, which just so happens to be a new type of Pokemon known as Gumshoos. It's quite larger than the others that appear in this area known as Verdant Cave. Ash is actually kind of surprised, and he notices that this thing glows in kind of an ethereal energy. Lima informs Ash that that's what all totem Pokemon do. They tend to get a boost to all of their powers, so be careful. Well, Ash, he doesn't really have a limit to the Pokemon he can use here. He can use as many as he has with him, so he starts off with his new Crabrawler. He figures that since this totem Pokemon is a normal type, a fighting type would be perfect. Unfortunately, he quickly finds out why a totem Pokemon is a totem Pokemon when Crabrawler, even though it has the type advantage, is quickly knocked out. So Ash decides to send in Latias, and Latias is where the difference really comes in. Having a legendary on your side, and with all of the battles it's been through with Ash, it's kind of his ace among aces, if you will, and there's not really much else Ash has that could be considered better than it. And it makes quick work of this Gumshoos, allowing Ash to collect the normal type Z Crystal, impressing Lima in the process. Now, this allows Ash to move on to Hala. Hala, well, he's gonna be a bit on the trickier side. You see, Hala is a fighting type trainer, and Ash is made fully aware of this when he goes back to Hala within a couple of days of getting his Z Crystal after resting up a little bit with Burnett, but there's a slight problem. Ash doesn't really have a Z ring, and he's kind of familiar with what a Z ring is. So now he has a Z Crystal that he can't really use, which Hala just finds hilarious. But in the shadows, there's a certain guardian watching Ash, and Latias has been aware of this the entire time. This guardian has actually been watching Ash since they first landed on the beach, but it has not been aggressive towards Ash or his Pokemon, so Latias just kind of let it, waiting to see if it would make a move. So while that's happening in the shadows, Ash decides to challenge Hala. While the battle with Hala does prove to be rather difficult for Ash, because Hala is one of those higher level trainers, kind of on the Elite 4 level, he does prove to be able to pull it through, with Latias being the difference maker here. This ends up getting him the Fighting type Z crystal, or as Ash has come to know them as, Fighting Z, and the Normium Z for his other Z crystal. But now Ash has a problem. He has 2 Z crystals and no Z ring, as he's come to learn from Hala. That night sitting outside Burnett's house, Ash just kind of hangs out. He's not really sure what else to do. He doesn't really know what to do with these Z crystals. He can't start practicing this new supercharged move. Now Latias, Pikachu, and Crabrawler are all kind of just hanging out with Ash. Crabrawler and Pikachu are kind of just hanging out, kind of trading blows, sparring a little bit in front of Ash as he looks out over the night sky. But Latias, on the other hand, it's been tracking something. That presence that it's been aware of since they first arrived, it's come a little close. Closer than the dragon type may be comfortable with, and it's a little on guard. It's at this point that Ash decides to take a walk against Latias's protests, but Ash just tells it it's okay, they'll be fine. Just kind of hang out. He's going to go just clear his head, maybe try to figure out how to get this Z ring. So Ash heads off into the hills behind the house, just kind of exploring a little bit. Maybe if he's lucky, he can find another Pokemon. But he's not alone for long, because this strange presence that has been watching Ash decides that this is its chance. That dragon that has been by Ash, who's extremely protective, hasn't given him the opportunity to get close to this boy. But this guardian knows that Ash is special. Now, it doesn't want to hurt Ash, but it does need to get close because it has a gift. And it gets to the point to where some wild Pokemon, maybe a couple of sparrows, some aggressive birds, find Ash in their territory, and they begin to attack. This is where this Pokemon makes itself known. This Pokemon is known as Tapu Koko, and it protects Ash from these wild Pokemon attacking it. This, however, triggers Latias, and it bolts in like lightning, wanting to protect its trainer. But Ash has to put a stop from the confrontation right then and there, because Latias is on the attack. It does not like the presence that it's feeling. Though this presence is not malevolent in nature, Latias doesn't really know it, and it's not comfortable with it being around. But it does do what Ash says, and it stands down, although maintaining the guard, ready to strike at a moment's notice. It's at this point that Tapu Koko presents Ash with strange rump, and as quickly as it appeared, it just vanishes back into the jungle. Not really sure of what he should do with it, Ash decides that in the morning he's going to take it to Hala. So they head back and head to bed. But in the morning, he decides to follow through with his plan, and he heads over to Hala, and Hala tells Ash, well, this is actually what you needed. You got this from Tapu Koko, didn't you? Ash nods, not really knowing what else to say. Hala just laughs. He says, well, if Tapu Koko has given you a ring, then it itself has endorsed you for the island challenge, which means there's not really any going back now. And it also proves that I was right about you, kid. Give me a couple hours. Let me work my magic, and then I'll have something for you. So Ash decides to take off. He goes to explore a little bit more of the island, because there's a whole nother side of the island that he hasn't really got a chance to see yet. So he and Pikachu hop on the back of Latias with Crabrawler on his belt, and they kind of bolt off to the other side, just to get a feel for things on Melee. Now, it's here that they touch down in a field, and this field seems to have plenty of wild Pokemon in it. While Ash really wasn't looking to catch a new Pokemon, he is quite interested in learning what is here on this island. And he gets introduced to a set of Pokemon. They're all the same Pokemon. They all look different. It's a Pokemon known as Oricorio. Ash is quite intrigued by these dancing-like Pokemon, so much so that he spends most of the time playing with them and getting to know their different unique properties. One is an electric type, one's a fire type, one's a psychic type, and one's a ghost type. This is intriguing to Ash. The island diversity here is amazing. The fact that it can produce 4 different variants of the same Pokemon, and Ash, being surprised by this, has no idea what he's in for. But it comes a point to where Ash has to leave. And you know Ash, when he bonds with the Pokemon, that Pokemon usually doesn't leave him. And it just so happens to be the Oricorio that is the fire type. It's taken a liking to Ash, his zesty, fiery flavor in life. And it's decided that it wants to hang around with it a little while longer. So Ash throws a Pokeball at it, catching it and adding it to its team. It's at this point that Ash heads back to Hala, and he gets his Z-Ring. Now, I know that the story has been moving kind of slow, but it required a lot of setup to get to this point. Now, we're gonna kind of be able to speed run the region, if you will, from this point on, now that we've established a Z-Ring with Ash, why he's in Alola, and he's gotten himself 2 out of 4 new members that he could catch here in the Alola region. So where will his next stop be? Well, it just so happens there's 3 trials and a kahuna on a call island. So Ash heads over and he meets this young, very young girl named Lana. She's actually only 8, but a trial captain. And she doesn't really have to battle because she doesn't have any Pokemon to her name at this point, but she was entrusted by her family with the Totem Pokemon. So it's at this point that Ash gets a chance to battle for the Water MZ by taking on the Totem Pokemon. Here he gets a chance to take on a Pokemon known as Wishy-Washy. Now here he tries using Crabrawler and he doesn't really want to go with Oricorio because he knows it's a fire type, but it's here that Ash ends up shattering the school form, getting them all back to their normal fish size and taking the Water Z crystal form set. It's at this point now that Ash has to head to the top of the volcano where he meets a brash young man who's a little confident in himself. Kiawe. He's the guardian of the Fire MZ, or the Fire Z crystal if you will, and he's a bit hesitant to let Ash take on the challenge. But this is where the island kahuna shows up, Olivia, and she tells Kiawe that even though Ash isn't really of age, he has been chosen by one of the Tapus, and he's got the endorsement from Hala, so it's okay. She's going to allow it. Kiawe is a little reluctant, but he eventually agrees, leading Ash up to the volcano top to where he can battle the Totem Salazzle. Now, this battle doesn't really take that long, honestly. Salazzle isn't super impressive as far as its stats are concerned, and Ash, he decides that he wants to use his Crabrawler here. Now, Crabrawler has proven that it's a little on the aggressive side, but it being a fighting type, Ash figured he'd let it, get the first couple of swings in. But eventually, even though the Totem Pokemon does have its boost going on, it takes the win, allowing Ash to capture the Fire MZ and Kiawe to kind of come around to Ash. But this leads us into the lush jungle, where Ash meets a spry young girl by the name of Mallow. And Mallow is the guardian of the Grass Z Crystal and the Totem Pokemon for the Lush Jungle. But they go through their ritual of making her a Alolan Basta, and they attract Lurantis. Now it's here that Ash allows Oricorio to get the chance to shine. It uses its vibrant dancing skills and its fire type moves to really take advantage of Lurantis and get the Ash the win here. And Ash ends up capturing his Grassium Z. Now, there is one thing we haven't really addressed. Ash has now cleared all the trials on this island, and he has yet to actually start practicing with any of his Z crystals. It's at this point that the 3 trial captains give Ash their opinion on this and tell him that if he hopes to beat Olivia, he's gonna have to start learning how to use them anyway. And the perfect place to start, because he has those particular Pokemon and those particular Z crystals, would be with Crabrawler and Oricorio, because he has both the fighting and the Fire Z. So Ash spends a couple of days getting to know the movements and bonding with his Pokemon, especially since how they're his newest Pokemon. Eventually, both of them are able to master their Z moves, and this is where we head into the battle with Olivia. Olivia, being a rock type trainer, would normally scream, "Don't use a fire flying against," but this is Ash, and well, Ash is gonna Ash. So he decides to lead the battle with Oricorio. Now, it's at this point that Ash finds out that you're only really allowed 1 Z move per battle, and this kind of disheartens him because he was really hoping to use both Oricorio and Crabrawler with their new Z moves. That's the whole reason why he decided to throw Oricorio here. But unfortunately, Oricorio ends up taking the L because of its ×4 weakness to rock types. This is where Ash sends in Pikachu, and Pikachu does a little bit of cleanup duty before it eventually takes the L, but then we come to Olivia's Lycanroc. And this is where Ash's Crabrawler gets a chance to shine, demonstrating its new Z move. And the fight is a little bit one-sided at first, but eventually Crabrawler proves that it can take a couple of hits and keep on coming back with its black eyes, and after an execution of its Z move, it gets the win, allowing Ash to claim the Rock Z Crystal. Now, this is where Ash makes a decision and mounts Latias. Now he's got to move on to Ula Ula Island. Now, Ula Ula Island doesn't have as many trials as the last one, but he does get a chance to meet one of the trial captains right away, Sophocles, and him and Ash seem to hit it off because they both love electric types. Sophocles is the keeper of the electric Z Crystal, Crystal and the Electric Totem Pokemon. So he ends up leading Ash to the observatory, and this is where Ash gets a chance to battle the Togedemaru. Now, Togedemaru is a bit of a beast, and it's here where Pikachu kind of has to establish dominance, because, you know, Pikachu clone and Pikachu can't stand for the clone, so it would be a little bit difficult for the smaller mouse to fight the bigger, fatter, beefed up mouse. But in the end, Pikachu would end up taking the win, giving Ash the electric type Z Crystal. Now, this Z Crystal is going to pose a very, very special purpose in the future, but for now, Ash spends time practicing with Pikachu so that way he can learn how to use it. And this is going to lead us right into the next trial captain, Acerola, and the guarding of the ghost types. This is where we meet the one Pokemon that is envious of Pikachu in all of its glory, the Mimikyu. Now, while Mimikyu is a cool Pokemon, its obsession with the mascot of the franchise is borderline disturbing. So Ash has to go into this battle, and again, it has to be Pikachu that starts things off because, well, Mimikyu really wouldn't let Ash battle with anything else. And unfortunately, because they're not really sure of what Mimikyu can do, Pikachu ends up taking the L here. But this opens it up for Ash to use a couple of his other Pokemon, and eventually he ends up cycling through all of them except for one, Crabrawler, and this is where Crabrawler gets its chance to shine just one more time, because even though it is a fighting type, it does have the ability to strike Mimikyu, and it doesn't really waste any time going in for, you know, a couple of hits here, a couple of hits there, and it ends up using its Z move. Don't ask anime logic. But this gets Ash the win for the Ghost type Z Crystal, allowing Ash to move on to the Island Kahuna. This is a bit of an odd one because this is where we get introduced to Nanu. And Nanu is one of those ones who's not super thrilled about his craft. He's kind of laid back, maybe even a little lazy. Now, it's at this point that Ash, well, he hasn't really had an encounter for a little while, and he's kind of been just cycling through the 4 Pokemon that he's had. So while he's chasing down Nanu to try and get his next grand trial underway, now it's at this point where Ash ends up coming across his next encounter, which is a harken back to the diversity that Ash was talking about when he caught his Oricorio, because it's an odd looking Sandshrew. Blue. Ash has never seen a blue Sandshrew before. Come to find out, this is what's known as an Alolan variant of Sandshrew, and it's not a ground type, an ice steel type. Ash goes through a little bit of a trial in itself here with this Sandshrew. You see, it's kind of withdrawn, and all it really does is it kind of stays curled up in its little ball, not really doing anything, and it just blocks a road. It's really become a nuisance to a lot of the locals. But Ash being Ash spends his time with it and really gets to know it, eventually bringing it out of its shell, if you will. And well, this allows Ash to capture the little thing and add it to its team for his 5th Pokemon. Now this is where Ash would capture the attention of Nanu, and he would get his chance at his 3rd grand trial. Now this is where things take a turn for Ash. The last couple of battles, the last couple of trials have been kind of easy for the young trainer. But Nanu, even though he's a dark type trainer, he's a very seasoned trainer, hence his age. He's really only 2nd to Hala in age as far as trial captains go, or Island Kahunas, if you will. But with that being said, he actually hands Ash his first L anywhere in Alola, and it forces Ash to go back to the drawing board and reevaluate some of his strategies. But that's okay though, because he gets a chance to get to know Sandshrew and get to know Crabrawler a little bit more, practice some more Z moves, and Ash gets a chance to come up with a winning strategy. Now, when Ash eventually goes back for his rematch, it ends up being Crabrawler that pulls most of the weights. Unfortunately, getting to the end, Crabrawler ends up getting knocked out, and Oricorio was the first to fall. But this still leaves Ash with Sandshrew. Now here, he aims to use Sandshrew's defensive typing with its Steel and Ice to his advantage. And even though Nanu is seasoned, Ash has seen his battle tactics before, so it's here where Sandshrew ends up actually getting the win. And because of the intensity of the battle, it actually ends up evolving into Sandslash, giving Ash his first official evolution here in the Alola region, and getting Ash the Dark Z Crystal in the process. This allows Ash to move on to the last island in the chain, Pony Island. While this island isn't too impressive ecologically, there are some unique things that happen. The first thing is the Island Kahuna and the trials. There's really only one trial captain because there hasn't been anybody strong enough to tame the dragon typing of the island in many a year. So Ash ends up hunting down Mina. She is the trial captain for the fairy typing. And after he battles her and uses a Alolan Sandslash to really take the win rather easily, he ends up getting invited to battle Totem Rabombi. And, well, he kind of just does the same thing with the Alolan Sandslash and clean things up rather quickly there, getting him the Fairy Z Crystal. It's at this point to where Ash has to track down where the Dragon Z Crystal is. There's not really a trial captain, and if he hopes to battle the Island Kahuna, he has to finish this trial. This leads him into Vast Pony Canyon, and after fumbling around for a couple of days and getting lost, well, Ash ends up coming across a giant dragon known as Komo-o-o. And yeah, this thing is just like Crabrawler. Being half fighting type, it likes to throw down. It is very protective of its territory. And being a totem Pokemon plus a pseudo legendary and all the stat boosts that come with that, it's rather difficult. But luckily for Ash, he's got just the thing he needs on his belt. Latias makes its appearance here. Now, while things are a little bit even because they both share the dragon typing, the psychic typing does give it the edge, and also the fact that it's a legendary Pokemon also gives it the edge. So Ash really makes quick work of the totem Pokemon, capturing himself the Dragon Z Crystal with a little bit of problems on the side, mainly the fact that he's hungry and they've been lost. But this allows Ash to head back to civilization. Now, there is one thing here that we're going to have to make a change from the main story here. You see, Ash is in Alola much earlier than in the normal timeline. I mean, just by Kukui being gone and Ash not really coming here with his mom, stuff like that, he really hasn't met any of his friends outside of Kiawe because Kiawe was a little bit old. But there's also one other person that he's not going to really be able to meet because she's a little too young. It would be Hapu. Hapu was the Island Kahuna in the games and in the anime, but there is one other person that was previously, and that was her grandfather. And I think instead of Ash battling Hapu here, he would end up battling her grandfather, taking him on and having to battle this old timer that may even rival Hala in age. Fortunately, we don't really know too much about him, but in the end, Ash would still end up taking on the grand trial here. Now, unfortunately, this is where we would see Ash lose. I would say if Hapu was the last Kahuna in the games and in the anime, then her grandfather was probably a very strong individual, which means he's probably very well rounded and has a lot of experience. So I think he might even send Ash back to the drawing board a couple of times, even though he's got a Latias. And, you know, Ash may have to adopt his strategy. But that's okay, though, because it would give him a chance to explore Pony Island and get to know it a little bit better. And he would probably get to know some new trainers, new Pokemon, and give him a chance to explore. So while he's exploring, Ash is going to get to meet some new Pokemon. And more importantly, he's going to get his final catch here in the Alola region. And this just so happens that when Ash is traversing the beach, he finds this said Pokemon or an item. He's not really sure at first, but Ash finds it interesting. So he heads into it's about knee deep when he pulls this item up. And the moment it surfaces, Ash realizes that it's not an item at all. Actually, Pokemon. Come to find out, this is known as a Delmise. Grass Ghost type, which is odd. Ash has never really seen anything like this before. But this Delmise has been laying there for quite a long time, kind of trapped in the sand, unable to really move. And it is extremely grateful for finally being, you know, above the waves, outside of low tide, if it even ever gets to see it. So, with that being said, it actually decides to join Ash on his adventure, which is actually turns out just what he needed, because at this point, when he goes back to battle Hapu's grandfather, he ends up using a combination of Crabrawler with Delmise and his Alolan Sandslash, with Delmise being the one to pick up most of the weight, but Alolan Sandslash getting him the win and earning him really his final Z Crystal, the Groundium Z. Now, while all this has been going on, Ash has been practicing to and fro with his new Z Crystals. Now, it's at this point that something interesting happens. Now, while there really won't be a Pokemon League here in Alola because Kukui's not back to start it, the Island Guardians, not just Tapu Koko, have been paying very close attention to Ash and the bond that he has with his Pokemon. And at the end of his grand trial, after he's beaten Hapu's grandfather, both Tapu Koko and Tapu Lele actually make their presence known to Ash. And there's a very unique reason for this, because Ash has gathered all the Z Crystals, but two Z Crystals in particular, the Electrium Z and the Psychium Z. These two Z Crystals are upgraded by the Island Guardians. converting them into custom Z crystals for both Pikachu and Latias. Now, Pikachu's we know too well because it's something that happens in canon. It's the 10 million volt Thunderbolt. But Latias, well, what could we really call it? Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about what kind of Z move that Latias could have that would be specifically for it. And one ability that it has kind of really stuck out to me. It's sight sharing ability with it and Latios. This kind of just screams to me that it would be something ethereal. Its ability to see beyond seeing. I would want to call this something like ethereal mind, which I think would fit Latias because its ability to sight share. It would kind of just tap into the mind of its opponent and just rip it to shreds. And with Latias's intense psychic abilities, it could potentially do that. And especially when it's a Z move, tearing it from the inside out is something that a psychic type would do. But it would be at this point that Alola would be kind of wrapped up. I mean, we're years ahead of time, and the Aether Paradise really hasn't made much research into its experiments with the Ultra Wormholes or anything like that. But for the sake of argument, we can say that an experiment gone awry ends up happening, triggering an Ultra Wormhole, and as a last send-off from Alola, Ash, well, he's gonna have to battle something that he's never seen before. Not even the Pokédex can identify. We know this Pokemon as Guzzlord, and well, Sir Lord of Guzz is going to prove quite difficult. Ash knows that Ultra Wormholes lead to places where we really aren't too familiar with, and he knows that this thing is from the place. So him, Pikachu, Latias, Crabrawler, Oricorio, Sandslash, and Dhelmise all do what they can to push this thing back into the Ultra Wormhole. It does take them a little bit, and there's a bit of a worry because of the whole Ultra Wormhole and it's slowly starting to close. But it's at this point that Ash chooses to activate his Z crystals, and he uses them in succession because this isn't really an official Pokemon battle. First striking with Pikachu, then striking with Latias. The force of these super ultra power exclusive only to his Pokemon moves allow them the force needed to push Guzzlord back into the wormhole as it seals off, saving Alola with really no crowd to watch. But it was one last sign-off experience for our hero, giving him and his Pokemon a lot of fun in Alola. So that's it. That's all we have. How'd you guys feel about this part? I know it's kind of different because there's not really a Pokemon League and we're not really setting Ash up to become a champion, but he still got to experience Alola. And I felt like after Sinnoh, because of there being sort of a suggested time gap between the time that he went from Sinnoh to Unova, that it would be perfect for him to try his hand at Alola instead. And not only that, but Latias and Pikachu end up getting their own custom Z moves, which, you know, works out for everybody. And at this point, Ash would, well, he would continue his adventures. Now, I'm not going to make the same mistake and say that he left all of his Alolan Pokemon in Alola, because I don't think that's fair. He takes them all back with him to Kanto. And unfortunately, the side effect of Kukui not being there means he doesn't really develop the bond with Burnett and Kukui that he had in the anime. But that doesn't mean that he's not free to stop by and enjoy a meal or two. But with all that being said, how'd you guys feel about this series? What did you think about this type of format and the layout of it? I really want to know what your guys' thoughts were down in the comments below, because if this is something that's popular, I may do this with other what ifs that I don't really feel like need a story. It'd just be fun to kind of speed run them, kind of like doing a game, that type of deal. And if that's the case, then maybe we could see a variety on the channel. That's not going to take me away from telling full-blown stories. It's just certain ones don't need full stories because I feel like it would be a waste to tell them like. But anyway, with all that being said, let me know in the comments down below about how you guys felt about this. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then that means that when I do the full story for this, that it's going to include the parts that were exclusive to Patreon. So if you guys are interested in seeing what would happen if Ash chose to become the Frontier Brain in that timeline, then look out for that full story, because that's where you're going to get that answer. But with all that being said, if you guys could do me a favor and just drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you already haven't. And if you're considering following me on my other platforms, head on over to Twitter where I post things from time to time, and hop into my Discord. Make sure to go in there, and if you want to start your own content, talk with people over there, or just talk with them in general about Pokemon or other things. And if you want to, you know, help us a little bit further over here at the Road and Charizard channel, consider donating on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because anything extra that you can give helps to make this channel grow. But with all that being said, Silverheart Soul, Robert, Vegito Gaming 78, Andrew McCartney, Holosif, Julian Rodriguez, Ruben Watson, Lord Explosion Murder, Assassin 139, Flyer 943, Shadow Dragon, Kevin Atran, Drax, Adrian Carr, Dino King, Dalen Silva, Fox King, Warney Taylor, Plus Ultraman, Mega, Mike Logan, Kendall Green, Earth Dragon, John Larson, Josh Van Meplin, Forbidden Super, Dylan Nicholson, Christopher Grant, Gerald Smith, and Normandy 1998. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.